For almost 30 years, China was the growth engine of the world economy. The magic combination of the low start level and a big, dynamic labor market allowed it to become the world's main producer of exports. Surely, developed countries like Japan and Germany also produced a significant amount, but none of them was able to do it at a low enough price point that would allow the whole industries to flourish on top of those value chains. However, the time of the China-driven growth is coming to an end. Worsening demographics, rising production costs, growing internal demand, and imploding bubbles like that in the real estate market become the highlights of the upcoming change. And this is even before we factor in spiraling geopolitical tensions that create more barriers for Chinese production. The question is in the air. Who is going to become the next reliable producer of the world's exports that offers low enough price, high enough quality, and the capacity for sustainable growth? Quite expectedly, India is trying to throw its hat into the ring, citing its massive population and long-standing involvement with outsourcing. Indeed, if we look at the growth of Indian exports in the past decades, it shows a promising picture. On the other hand, India had a problem with bringing big numbers of people out of poverty, educating them at scale, increasing their productivity, and, in the age of rising geopolitical risks, clearly indicating which team it is on. Thus, 3 more regions are in the competition for the role of the planet's next production hub. First of all, it is South America. Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, and Brazil are the main faces of this club. As you can see, this region already surpasses India in exports, not lastly because its labor force is better educated on a general level and more balanced across genders. The next player that everybody's talking about is Southeast Asia. Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and others. Even when we exclude the expensive and already developed Singapore, the countries of ASEAN show a remarkable level of export growth in the past 30 years, and things are only starting to accelerate. Finally, there is one more region that is in the game for the future of the world's production. It is the Intermarium, the countries of Central and Eastern Europe, from Bulgaria to Estonia, and from Ukraine to the Czech Republic. With the Indian bid remaining in question, it is the Intermarium, Southeast Asia, and South America that step in as regions to offer the world economy the next production hub to build upon. One could have noticed the first signs of those rising regions by paying attention to main destination hubs for software outsourcing. Besides China, India, and Israel, it is those 3 regions with skilled talent, competitive pricing, and evolving infrastructure which brought a competitive offering to this knowledge-driven sector. But their progress was bigger than just in IT. GDP growth in those regions consistently surpassed developed economies, which led to gradual economic progress tied to accumulation of wealth, knowledge, and productivity. For example, this is how GDP per capita improved across Southeast Asian countries, ranging from Myanmar to Malaysia. This is pretty comparable to countries of South America, with a range from Bolivia to Chile. And then we have the countries of the Intermarium, from Ukraine to the Czech Republic. You can see that despite high progress of EU members, Intermarium still has a significant room for growth, especially in such parts as Ukraine and Western Balkans. And all 3 regions overlap to a large degree. But the Intermarium has a few more strong cards up its sleeves. The most important one of them is the education level of its population. As a matter of fact, such countries as Estonia and Poland are better than almost anyone in Europe on this measure besides Ireland and Finland. And this not only results in higher productivity, but also a more balanced and more involved workforce across age groups and genders. The second advantage of the Intermarium is lower exposure to climate risks than in South America or Southeast Asia. This factor increasingly grows in its importance. Such countries as the Philippines, Vietnam, and Thailand are particularly vulnerable. But Indonesia and Malaysia are also located near the equator, where temperature increase is going to be among the highest, all while having a significant coastline prone to floods. The problem that many South American countries are also going to face. Finally, Intermarian countries cooperate with each other on a deeper level than other regions. Naturally, the EU plays a significant role here, both for members and for applicants. But even besides the EU, Intermarian countries coordinate closely on such things as the relationship with China, infrastructural projects within the 3 Seas initiative, and more local coordination on the level of the Visegrad Group, the Craiova Group, the Lublin Triangle, the Open Balkan Zone, and others. And don't forget that the Intermarium is very conveniently located near the main buyers' markets. It looks like the Intermarium has almost everything to become the next big thing for the world's development. Almost everything. Except for one important thing. It has absolutely terrible demographics. As a matter of fact, one could call it the worst on the planet. It is expected that proportionately, the Intermarium countries will lose the most population during this century. Well, this map was created before declining Russia decided to throw itself into a war where it uses its own population as cannon fodder, but still, Intermarian countries have a massive demographic problem on its hands. Let's take a look at demographic pyramids of the Intermarian countries. Pay attention to the trends at their bottoms that reflect the young generation. Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia. You can tell it doesn't look great. Hungary is a good example how you cannot simply pay women into making more babies. All the so-called pro-family policies of Hungary did not make it any better comparing to its neighbors. Belarus, Romania, dramatic Ukraine, Bulgaria. Poland, Belarus and Romania have slightly more stable pyramids at the bottom. Well, Poland received a lot of immigrants from the east and Belarus tried not to let them out. Ukraine is deeply affected by the war, but a big number of those losses are hopefully temporary refugees, many of them to Poland. And Bulgaria is just a case study on how you can start losing your young population when you integrate with better developed countries faster than you do your reforms. If we compare it with leading Western economies, the USA, the UK and France look much better. France is actually the best one here. Germany, not so much, but still not as bad as Bulgaria or the Czech Republic. China is criticized for its demographic structure, but mostly because at Chinese scales, such discrepancies lead to dramatic consequences. While India looks just fantastic from the pure pyramid structure. The same is true for Southeast Asia. Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, all are absolutely in a great shape. Malaysia is at the development level of Poland, but look how much better are its demographic prospects. And if you think that Latin America would be much worse, you will be surprised. Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Chile, Uruguay, Peru all show pretty healthy demographics. Again, Chile would roughly correspond to the economic development of Poland, and yet with much more stable demographics. The only region that is worse than the Intermarium are developed East Asian economies such as Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore. But no one expects them to lead in producing cheap, competitive experts. This ship has long sailed for them, and these countries are not losing their labor force toward more advanced regions of the European Union. The demographic problem of the Intermarium has two main underlying drivers. First is the decrease of fertility rates following industrialization and urbanization in those countries. And the second is the outward migration of its workers, mostly to the west of Europe, that offers better prospects, higher pay, and more advanced jobs. Honestly speaking, there isn't much that is possible to do about either one of those drivers within the existing paradigm. The drop in fertility rates is an absolutely natural phenomenon which surely was exacerbated by the economic transition that the Intermarian countries had to go through. As a matter of fact, if you look at the number of children per woman, the Intermarian countries are mostly above average within the EU, with a trend for improvement except for Poland and Lithuania. Surely those countries can do more on stimulating births, but to be honest, it is not going to move a needle, because the required replacement level fertility is located all the way over there and is not reached by any EU country regardless of their policies. But a bigger question, what is the point of stimulating all of those births if the gains are going to be cancelled by the critical number of people moving out to the west of Europe anyway? The process that is doomed to continue across the board for generations. Sure, economic progress will slow it down, and over time it will probably make the moving less likely, like it did for the Czech Republic, but it is not going to stop it, let alone reverse it. And even the most advanced Czech economy continues to be net negative on the population growth over the past 3 decades. The reason behind this is the same reason why all provinces tend to lose population in favor of capitals within countries. And as long as the Intermarium remains a European province, European backwaters, and not the European center, it will continue to be simply a supplier of labor for the West. The only tool known to the economists to effectively undo this process is to significantly increase immigration from less developed countries. But this stumbles into the identity issue, which for historic reasons plays a much bigger role in the east of Europe than in the west. The topic of nationalism deserves a separate video, but let's say it is an evolutionary feature of the Intermarian countries that needs to be accounted for, especially due to its effects on politics. Bottom line, neither birth stimuli, nor immigration, nor economic progress on its own are going to solve the huge demographic problem of the Intermarium. And its leading cities will never be able to effectively compete against the megacities of the continent's west, of which the most important ones are only two: London and Paris, remotely followed by the metropolitan areas around Madrid, Milan, and the German Ruhr area. But these two European megacities are actually on the smaller side comparing to what's going on in Asia, North America, or even South America. There are 33 megacities on Earth, and Europe looks pretty pale on this map. No wonder it has problems growing or even leading. The natural answer for the Intermarium in the world of the growing importance of megacities is to create the one of its own. But it has to be done in a smart way that changes the picture not only in terms of quantity, but also in quality. The Intermarian megacity that is designed to lead into the future, rise to the challenges on the global scale, and represent all of Europe, not just a part of it. And maybe even represent not a region, but a certain idea or a goal that is worthy of the humanity's future. Something that will inspire and lead people in the long run, attract talent from all of Europe and beyond, and reverse the migration paradigm. First, let's look at what we already have. Within the Intermarium, we have 6 largest cities that are located across 6 countries. The biggest one of them is Kiev, with over 3 million population that even the war wasn't able to change much. Actually, despite fleeing refugees, some people moved into Kiev because it is better defended from air raids. Bottom line, Kiev looks to stay as a leading regional city even after the war ends. The second largest city is Minsk. Sure, it currently goes through some challenging times with a local usurper that tries to wiggle out of the Russian war, but as we saw it in 2020, the writing is on the wall. The days of the regime are numbered and the change is coming sooner or later. And Minsk has always been a vibrant place, especially when it comes to young IT talent. The third largest city in population, and the leading city in terms of its economy, is Warsaw, with slightly below 2 million people, followed closely by Bucharest, whose economic growth also recently stepped on accelerator. After that comes Budapest, a famously liberal capital in a famously conservative country, and finally, the jewel of the region, Prague. These numbers show just core cities, but Warsaw, Budapest, and Prague also have extensive metropolitan areas around them that can add 70 to 80% more people to those numbers. Surely, all these cities are unique and different, but this is a good thing. Their uniqueness gives them a strong level of internal cohesion that allows to use them as building blocks for something bigger. And the way to leverage their combined strength would be to create neutral transborder zones between them connected with high-speed transport. At the very least, one zone to the north of the Carpathians and one zone to the south, but there could be more than just two. The zones that will have extraterritorial status, meaning the status outside of national laws, yet with easy access to all of the capitals, magnified by ultra-fast connection lines. De facto, such a network will create one big supranational megacity where national capitals perform the role of distinct neighborhoods. The power of the cities will get united, while the countries will stay independent. This will allow to open the fundamentally new level of opportunities and growth for businesses, societies, and individuals without upending the national politics and avoiding troubles around immigration. Some cities will have better access to capital, others better access to labor or technologies or certain markets. Each will have a role to play. And the transborder zones will act as converters and transmitters of this energy. The combined size of this megacity will be more than 11 million people. And if you account for the complete agglomeration of all involved neighborhoods and metropolitan areas, the number will surpass a staggering 20 million people, which will overshadow all of the current leading agglomerations of the continent, such as Paris, London, Istanbul, or Moscow. And the high-speed connection will be the key. This megacity will need a type of transport that can effectively transform remote cities into subway stops. Be it a trip from Prague to Kiev, or from Bucharest to Warsaw, or from Minsk to Budapest, it needs to be a quick and easy option. but the overwhelming traffic will of course go in the direction of those transborder zones. Such a transborder megacity would be impossible within the EU, say it between Warsaw, Berlin and Paris, because then it will only make the demographic problem worse by helping to vacuum more people out of Poland toward Germany and France. It is the very nature of the external EU border that makes the connection work for all sides. This will also help to keep it outside of national legislations and bureaucracy, as well as leverage the unique nature of the smaller Intermarian countries, which are dominated by their capitals more than in the countries of the west of Europe. There are many dimensions that help this special transborder connection make sense. Culturally, these unique zones are a meeting point between Slavic, Romance and Finno-Ugric languages, and since English is likely to be the lingua franca of these zones, you can also add Germanic to the mix, thus covering all major European linguistic legacies. It is also the border that connects Roman Catholic, Greek Catholic, Orthodox and Protestant traditions, the border between Cyrillic and Latin traditions. But there are also many more practical dimensions to this border. Above all, this is the border between different railway track gauge zones, meaning in terms of transport, those two parts of the Intermarium were disconnected for over a century, and creating an infrastructural connection between them makes the whole world of sense that will give the region the new level of quality. Today, all trains, passenger and cargo, need to spend hours at the border waiting while narrow gauge wheels are changed to wide gauge and vice versa. This historic oddity is the main curse of the region's logistics. But it is not just wheels. There are also different railway voltage zones that, by the way, have no relation to the gauge zones and that affect the choice of locomotives and how rails are constructed and maintained. Right now, the Intermarium is a logistics disaster, where it is not uncommon for overused trucks to spend days at the border. And in terms of high-speed rail, this part of Europe is utterly underdeveloped, not least because its countries are too small to connect anything with high speed. Customs, tariffs, tracks, differences in rules and regulations prevent the region from putting its capabilities to full use. Transborder zones designed to connect Intermarium's largest cities is a way to solve this. The transborder zones will be the linchpins of the project, and they can create the new type of urban dwelling that national capitals cannot, from developing them as charter cities to being much more open to the global workforce than the national capitals that they connect. Hence, there are 5 main attributes that the transborder zones will require. They need to be extraterritorial, hyperconnected, global, landmark, and resilient. Extraterritorial status is very important. It allows those zones to create the best possible legislation that is required for their development and growth. One of the examples of such development is an innovative approach of organizing zones as charter cities. Charter cities are not regulated by national legislations, but by a special charter, established between its citizens and the city management, thus allowing to implement the best policies in a flexible manner with independent administration and judiciary. Elements of charter cities help to propel the growth of Hong Kong, Singapore and Shenzhen, driving their people out of poverty. For example, since the lingua franca of such a transborder city is likely to be English, instead of going for the civil law system that dominates continental Europe, a charter city may use elements of the common law system, borrowing the foundation for it from one of the English-speaking territories. Charter cities work the best in the greenfield construction, meaning where cities are created basically from scratch. And this is exactly what our transborder zones offer. The next is the hyper-connected status. As a litmus test, the connection between participating cities needs to be so fast that you could imagine a scenario where a person lives in Budapest, Bucharest or Kiev and every day commutes to work to one of our transborder areas, meaning the trip should be around an hour. One of the evolving technologies that can potentially solve this is Hyperloop. Hyperloop is your, so to speak, typical maglev train that is put into a tube with significantly reduced air resistance that allows it to reach plane-level speeds with train-level capacities, urban feed, and operation costs. Europe is actually leading this charge with the creation of the European Hyperloop Center and a test track that opened last year in Groningen in the Netherlands. But China and India are absolutely not lagging behind. And if the Intermarium wants to compete with those regions, it cannot rely on last century's transport, especially since our disconnected region offers the best possible use case for what Hyperloop can do. Its exact role is to turn cities into subway line stops. The third attribute is that transborder zones need to be global in nature. They should not aim to open themselves only to the neighboring countries, but to the world in general. Again, something that neither the EU nor national countries can or want to do. The zones need to be able to attract whoever they want from wherever they want. Any best talent from Brazil, Indonesia or Nigeria should be able to contribute to Alpha Intermarium if the fit is mutual. This way, the zones and the cities they connect will have the potential to evolve into a megacity with truly planetary role, significance and goals. The goals that will go beyond the petty problems that the Intermarium is focused on now. The goals that can give it a purpose for centuries, like the goal of driving the colonization of the solar system, or the goal of leading the sustainable management of the planet Earth, or similar. The landmark attribute of the city implies the need for a signature, recognizable and iconic visual style that is aligned with a sustainable internal organization. For example, the organization in the form of an arcology, an urban structure that combines architecture and ecology and provides healthy, low-footprint existence. Other mega projects that are currently under planning or construction understand the need to be sustainable and recognizable. Be it the innovative city of Neom that is currently under construction in Saudi Arabia with a very unique architectural style, as well as the urban organization in the form of a line that stretches for miles and removes the need for private transport. Or the Shimizu Pyramid City, planned in Japan and designed to grow in 3 dimensions, where reclined elevators replace cars. Or the Colossal City project in the USA that is designed to be built in a desert around the idea of Georgism, a single-tax economic ideology. But unlike Neom, Shimizu or Tilosa, Alpha Intermarium does not create the entire city from nothing, but connects the already existing agglomerations via urban transit zones, which is much easier. The zones that will have to become the global face of this project, built around sustainable growth concepts. Finally, resilience, or flexible and scalable anti-fragility. The thing is that historically all modern countries and blocks of countries grew up to become fortresses. Their external borders, regulations and even cultural barriers have grown to act as a shell that protects them from outside. But when this shell is violated in any place, it leads to internal crisis. You can almost compare them to exoskeletons, which were one of the life's first adaptation to external threats. But the evolution led life to the creation of another organizational form, endoskeletons, that were more flexible and more scalable and that eventually came to win the competition. A local flesh wound on an endoskeletal structure does not spell doom to the entire system. Similarly, today's blocks of countries are investing billions in order to barricade themselves off with borders and surveillance, immigration rules, economic barriers, and expensive militarized police. But a group of illegals from Africa, or refugees from Syria, or no insignia Russian paratroopers in the Suwalki Gap can send the whole big system into a shock where countries start blaming each other, going into political crises, electing marginal politicians into public offices, or collapsing entire structures of international treaties. The suggested megacity is a new evolutionary type of a supranational organization built around an internal piece of infrastructure similar to how vertebrate animals are built around a spine. A problem in one participating nation should not have a dramatic effect on the entire system if the problem remains fairly local. The Alpha Intermarium megacity, built around transborder zones and high-speed connecting lines, is the same to the modern blocks of countries as an adaptive vertebrate fish is to a huge Ammonolocarius of the late Cambrian period. And we all know who wins in the end. The suggested Alpha Intermarium megacity is the next step in the evolution of cities in their competition with countries. Retreating globalization leaves the world compartmented and less efficient. But if the history teaches us something, it is that countries are often vulnerable, but cities stick around for much longer. It is time to use the best achievements that modern technology and society have to offer and combine them with the lasting power of the largest Intermarian cities to produce a structure that can rise to the challenges of the future on the global scale, all while creating the new center of Europe's development. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to press like if you enjoyed it and leave us a comment what do you think about the Intermarian megacity.